This is Covering the Spread, part of the FanDuel Podcast Network.
It is time to talk about the Niners. Week 13 is fully in the books, and week 13 was basically defined by the 49ers with their win over the Eagles. So today we're going to dive into the futures market and take a look at both the Niners to win the Super Bowl and Brock Purdy MVP, everyone's favorite topic that has never made anybody mad ever. We're going to talk about both those for today with Ryan Williams getting his read on the futures market as it stands right now entering week 14. Then I'll dig into the week 14 spreads, money lines, and totals and let you know where my models show value over at FanDuel Sportsbook. This is Covering the Spread right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and FanDuel Research. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a managing editor of digital media for FanDuel Research, joined here as I am every Tuesday by Ryan Williams. Check him out on Twitter at RyanAlexander_W. And Ryan, had you on the show yesterday, and you made 9 recommendations. 7 of them wound up hitting. And 2 of those were plus 210 and plus 270. So I feel like, I don't want to speak for you, but you got to be feeling pretty good entering this Tuesday.
Yeah. Sorry, Jim. I talking the bets that we had last night, and what a fun way to spend a Monday when both of us are reeling in on Bengals bets when Joe Burrow's not out there. We talked about it. I mean, Chase gets fed just in prime fashion as you were hitting the alt markets, and thank you for bringing that up so that we could reap the benefits as such, and hopefully our fans and listeners could do the same thing. It's just the name of Jacksonville all year long. That's kind of why I have not been on them at all this year. Every week it feels like I'm sour on them, and I thought this was one time where money line, we're always talking about that. We'll just go with the spread, but no, overtime with Jake Browning, and shout out to Jake Browning too, sitting in the wings there and able to kind of handle business while playoff hopes are still alive. So definitely a fun Monday night for us last night.
Yeah, it definitely was. That plus 370 money line was a fun sweat. Enjoyed that. Wish it hadn't come at the expense of Trevor Lawrence, but it sounds like he'll be okay long term. So I think that will be that's a positive. Whether he'll play week 14, more up for debate. We'll talk about that Jags and Browns game later on today. I will, in taking a look at week 14. We'll talk about all that later on. But first, a quick reminder to make sure you're subscribed to Covering the Spread wherever you get your podcast. We are here every weekday breaking down NFL and college football betting markets. Tomorrow, we're talking some NBA and NHL with Tom Vecchio, getting his read on what he sees over there as we get set for more rounds of the NBA in-season tournament and a beefy NHL Wednesday slate. To get that as it is posted, make sure you're subscribed to Covering the Spread wherever you get your podcast. You can also find us on the FanDuel YouTube page and FanDuel TV Plus. Let's begin things, Ryan, by talking about those 49ers, because after their big win over the Eagles on Sunday, they're now the favorites to win Super Bowl 53 or 58. I actually don't know how Roman numerals work. Anyway, there's the favorite to win this year, whatever number it may be. They are plus 380 at FanDuel Sportsbook. Eagles are second at plus 480, followed by the Chiefs at 5-1. So let's talk about the Niners here, Ryan. Do you think they should be the favorites to win it all this year?
Yeah, I definitely think that the 49ers deserve to be the favorite when you're looking at the way that they handled business against the Eagles, who have pretty much been the favorite on the FanDuel Sportsbook all season long. You love that Debo's able to back up the talk there and score 3 touchdowns, not 1, not 2, but 3, to be able to handle business. And this is kind of the name of the game that has been under the Kyle Shanahan era. And, it is kind of just, I think we talked about this maybe in like week 2 or 3 at the beginning of the season, or maybe it was after that when they were kind of reeling. And it was like, would it surprise us that the 49ers are, back in the mix again? Just because they had a rough stretch, and teams go through that all the time. And I think this is just one of those merits where, we kind of talk about it every week, Jim, where you're kind of taking the markets when we know that we know how teams are. if teams are good and if they have, if they have that backing and to jump on them, because, you could have got the 49ers, early on this season at a way favorable number and be feeling really good about your chances right now for them to compete in the Super Bowl. And especially with the way that the playoff structure is set up to get that first round bye, like that win was everything for San Fran as they were rolling. Obviously the Philadelphia Eagles, like their end of the season schedule was absolutely outrageous, like looking at future win totals. And I was like, man, dude, the Eagles really good. Like Giants twice, and some I know they'll have Dallas, but some of the other games they have is just hilarious. So, but yeah, definitely like San Fran out of the NFC. I still think that there's merit, and the book is rightfully saying so in Kansas City. Like, it's just so tough. I get it, tough game against the Green Bay Packers who are out of it and all of a sudden are now back in the mix of things. But they'll figure out a way to get it together. And once you're in the dance, like, then you got, especially if people need to travel to Arrowhead, like you still got to be able to handle your business against the reigning champs. So I'm still on Kansas City bets where we can, but it does make it a lot more interesting race in the AFC.
Yeah, Kansas City 5-1 right now at FanDuel Sportsbook. I think the most enticing team to me outside of the 49ers is the Cowboys, plus 950. You mentioned the Eagles' schedule. I think that plays a big part in this because it does increase the odds that the Eagles wind up winning the NFC East. And it's pretty tough to come back as a wild card to win it all, but they're a really good football team. They do get the Eagles at home this week. I've got them as a value at minus 3.5 right now as well. So it's a good spot for Dallas. I think that they'll likely be shorter than plus 950 once we're talking here next week. I agree the Niners should be the favorites. I think that is fully justified. I think that is the correct call. And I can't push back on that. But if I'm looking for like value right now, I think the Cowboys plus 950 pretty intriguing, at least from my perspective. Now, making the Niners the favorites is not controversial, Ryan. What is controversial potentially is Brock Purdy being the co-favorite for MVP alongside Dak Prescott. Both those guys are 3-1 right now at FanDuel Sportsbook, followed by Jalen Hurts at plus 350. Those three have kind of pulled away from the pack. So, Ryan, I want to get your take on this market. What's your read on where things stand right now in the MVP market?
Yeah, so for me right now, and hopefully I'm coming through okay, Joe. I think this is the clearest, so we're good. But yes, the what's fun for me right now is just looking at the others, I'll call them, outside of the mix. It's too funny to me that we've talked so much about the AFC all season long, and now as we sit going into week 14, the three favorites to win the MVP all live within the NFC, which makes that a ton of fun for that. But for me, it starts with Tua. And the reason being is because when you look at him from a statistical standpoint, like, first of all, Tyreek Hill is set to like every offensive player of the year award here, and that directly correlates to Tua. And I don't understand why Tua is coming in at plus 800. Like, he's been higher than this when they were kind of reeling, and now all of a sudden they want to put him back down to 8-1, close to 10-1. I'm totally fine with that. Let's take advantage. Third in passing yards, he's second in passing touchdowns. Right end of year schedule from a competition standpoint, and that's where it comes down for me, is like, he's going to have to play against teams that are playoff contenders. And if the Dolphins are able to handle business, the whole their body. And so now they have an opportunity at the end of the year, at the end of season, to be able to win some of these tough games. And that's what really excites me about getting Tua futures here. They're tied with Baltimore for the best record. And he has the second best odds to be the leader in passing touchdowns. And so with all those things combined, it really doesn't make sense that we're getting an 8-1 number for me.
Yeah, Tua right now is 8-1 at FanDuel Sportsbook. Tyreek Hill is 16-1. Want to pick your brain quick on one guy, Ryan, and that one guy is Josh Allen, 30-1 right now at FanDuel Sportsbook. You and I have talked a lot about Bills futures throughout this year, potentially buying into them, and part of the reason we've been hesitant to do so is because the Bills standing in the AFC was pretty rough. But now you had the losses on Sunday for both the Steelers and the Browns, which does increase the odds that the Bills can make the playoffs. I show value on the Bills money line to win this week against the Chiefs, plus 118. So they could win that game. They get the Cowboys in the following week. That game is at home, though, which does help the Bills for sure. And then it's Chargers, Patriots, Dolphins. And the Dolphins one is tougher, but it's week 18. We don't know what motivation will be. And I think if the Bills scratch and claw their way to the playoffs, I think that Josh Allen will be in the discussion. I think that Josh Allen should be in the discussion if that happens. So I have interest in Allen at 30-1, but Ryan, is that a bit too far-fetched? Are there too many dominoes that to fall our way to get that to happen? Or do you think that Allen is intriguing at that number?
Yeah, listen, nobody's been investing more in the Buffalo Bills this year than this guy. So it's always intriguing to me to see if we can get Buffalo bets. I think what we're looking at right now, Jim, is just, we're kind of it's think about, game. Just think about our P's and Q's right now. And that relates to the Buffalo Bills making the playoffs. I think there's merit to taking those odds there as they're still plus money. They're going to have, they have a tough road ahead of them. And I think at this point in time, we're the loss to Cincinnati, lost to Jacksonville, who's kind of reeling. Like they have some tough losses on their resume that makes it tough to be able to buy into Josh Allen, especially with him in the turnover market where he's coming in. The fumbles and the interceptions. And again, they're going to have to play against Kansas City in Arrowhead. They're going to play Dallas at home, and think it's a little bit favorable, but I think he could still struggle in those games. They could still find ways to win, but he might have done enough earlier on this season to already keep him outside the playoff or not playoff picture, outside the MVP discussion. So that's what makes it tough. I mean, again, the number is so enticing. And I think, Jim, if what we talked about a couple of weeks ago was like, if Buffalo gets in, that's where I'm excited. Get futures on them. Like, don't take a shot on MVP because it's such a narrative driven, award type of thing. That's people vote on it. So let's not talk about that. Let's talk about how they're, 35-1 to win the Super Bowl. Yeah. And like, if they get in, would that surprise anybody? Because they've kind of been in the mix. We've seen them in shootouts with Kansas City. Even if this team has to go onto the road, like they still have, they still have the pieces at play. This is the same thing with the 49ers. Like, would it surprise us? Like, probably, but then we'd be like, well, they have Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs and they shored up the defense. So like, what's surprising about that? And, taking on a Kansas City team. Oh, we saw them, really struggle all season long. This shouldn't be surprising. That's where I think a Buffalo Bills bets can be made.
Yeah, 35-1 is a pretty good call on Super Bowl odds for the Bills. Again, they got to get there, but if they do get there, they've got upside. I think that is a reason why we can still be intrigued by the upside of this team. Okay, let's look beyond just the Niners, Ryan. Talk about teams that they've gotten a boost up or down for you across week 13. When you look back on this past week, which teams to you got the biggest boost up or down across the futures market?
Yeah, I think when we're looking at it, and I've talked about this for quite some time. I think Deshaun Watson being out for the Browns is really tough to kind of buy into any stock for the Browns. I mean, they've been a great story in the sense of like losing Nick Chubb earlier this season, being able to battle back with the revolving door of quarterbacks that they've kind of put into the mix this season and the way the defense has been playing. I mean, if they do happen to make the playoffs, Jim, it will be straight on the laurels of the defense. I'm fully convinced, but I still think from an offensive standpoint, you gotta get something going there. And they just haven't been able to hit that stride. And so I feel bad about talking about them from a stock down perspective, but I do feel like there is some merit there. We keep talking about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers being in the mix. The Saints losing to the Lions at home is stock. I've been talking about time as we see the NFC South kind of playing out the way that we've expected. So the Falcons right now, and if the playoffs were today, the Falcons would be in, but there's still so many interdivisional matchups that have to be played out. Tampa Bay kind of leapfrogs the Saints there. So I do still think that division is a fun one to get bets on. Even if you feel like the Saints are still in the mix, like they have the longest odds right now. So take a shot on them. But I've really been buying into Tampa Bay and like what they're doing from an offensive standpoint at this current juncture in time. And then, obviously with the Houston Texans, I think there is some merit there to still be buying into their stock. I mean, it's just incredible what they're doing. I don't think there's any shot for CJ Stroud to win MVP. he hasn't done enough. And losing Tank Dell is going to be a huge loss for them. But it's just fun to talk about the Houston Texans every week that we can. For those of us who have plus 850 CJ Stroud offensive rookie of the year cards that we're holding on to, and now he is minus 9,000, I believe, on the FanDuel Sportsbook last I checked. So fun stuff going on there.
Yeah, let's check out the offensive rookie of the year odds, minus 9,000, like you said, and well deserved, honestly. With that, he does get a downgrade, no Tank Dell, but Ryan, the streak of now 13 consecutive games of showing value in the Texans money line is intact. So I do show value in them once again this week against the Jets. They are minus 300. So you're paying a hefty amount, but it's still a value based on what my numbers say. So we are continue to ride the Texans. Any other futures you're digging into entering week 14, Ryan?
Yeah, so definitely looking at win totals and playoffs now that we're getting into that point in time. We kind of touched on that, me briefly, just kind of looking into this market, and the Eagles win total. I thought there could be some merit there to taking them under the number, which I believe is 13.5. Yeah, 13.5 wins, but the schedule is just way too favorable for them. When you look at their outlook, it's really tough to see them losing games against the Giants, games against the Seattle. They're going to play Dallas, but they were going to be favored in that game. So this will be a market that I stay pretty close to as the season goes along. But let's talk about some players. So I'm loving that you brought up Dallas. Dallas futures. Let's start thinking about that now that the Eagles have lost to San Fran and what kind of their destiny holds. And I talked about Tua MVP. The caveat is that Tyreek Hill winning all these Offensive Player of the Year awards, he's the favorite right now to be Offensive Player of the Year. And I think it's minus 260 is where Tyreek Hill is coming in about right now on the season award there. I know you're pulling it up here for us. Minus 200. Okay, so minus 70 for Christian McCaffrey, which I think is interesting because I don't see Brock Purdy and Christian McCaffrey bringing home hardware. So that leads me to CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee Lamb is 25-1 to win Offensive Player of the Year, and they're going to get a matchup on Christmas Eve, the Cowboys and the Dolphins, that is. And if CeeDee Lamb if he keeps on the trend that he is, which I think we have 100 yards or a touchdown in 8 out of the 9 past games since October 1st. So CeeDee Lamb's been doing it. He's been carrying the boat for Dak Prescott, who is now one of the favorites to win MVP. Let's talk about narratives there. CeeDee Lamb goes out and performs on Christmas Eve with Tyreek Hill on the same field as him. We can make sure that this works out in our favor. So 25-1 just is such a long shot that I love getting action on CeeDee Lamb there as it currently stands. I think, we're just talking about things to have fun with. That's one of them that I'm going to be on. The other one, we really talk about defensive options. So I'm really excited to talk about this one. Let's go to the sack market and talk about Lil Mac. He was a household name at one point, been in a couple trades, and he's on this defense for the Chargers that has been reeling, but he's been kind of the lone bright spot, right? You're looking at 2 sacks for Khalil Mack in each of the past 3 games. He's plus 650 in this market. Now, I will say, we're looking at the outlook here. TJ Watt, who's the favorite at plus 250, they're going to get some really favorable matchups for Pittsburgh starting on Thursday night.
Yeah.
With the Patriots for him to be able to rack up. But right now, as it stands, Khalil Mack is a sack ahead of TJ Watt to be leading the market with 15. If we remember back to when they played the Raiders earlier this year, came against the Raiders. 6 sacks in 1 game. They still have the Raiders to play on their schedule because of the divisional matchup. Can he get 6 again? Who knows? Maybe not. But if he gets another multi-sack game in there, he has that lead against TJ Watt. I do find it interesting for Khalil Mack as that front line for them. So for him to be, if there's merit.
Yeah, plus 650 for Khalil Mack to lead the league in sacks. You've got Josh Allen, the Jags. Josh Allen is plus 650 as well. Danielle Hunter plus 470, Myles Garrett plus 380, and TJ Watt plus 250. I love, Ryan, you brought up the market because I never think about it, so I'm glad that at least someone here on this show does. That is Ryan Williams. Make sure you check him out on Twitter at RyanAlexander_W. Ryan, have a fantastic rest of your week. We'll talk to you once again on Monday for a doubleheader on Monday Night Football.
That's right, Jim. I'm happy you brought that up. A Monday night doubleheader with so much action for us to get in on. But yes, thanks for having me. Can't wait to chat it up with you next week, and have a good one.
Alrighty. Again, find Ryan on Twitter at RyanAlexander_W. We'll have him back with us once again next week on both Monday and Tuesday. We're going to dive into week 14 and lay out where my models show value for this week at FanDuel Sportsbook in just 1 second. But first, score early this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there is no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use. There is a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, totals, and more. So visit FanDuel and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Must be 21 plus and present in select states. FanDuel is offering online sports wagering in Kansas under an agreement with Kansas Star Casino LLC. First online real money wager only. $5 pregame money line wager required. $10 first deposit required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets that expires in 7 days after receipt. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit fanduel.com/RG in Colorado, Iowa, Michigan, New Jersey, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Illinois, Kentucky, Tennessee, and Virginia. Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT STEP to 53342 in Arizona, 1-888-789-7777, or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut, 1-800-9-WITH-IT in Indiana, 1-800-522-4700, visit ksgamblinghelp.com in Kansas, 1-877-770-STOP in Louisiana, visit mdgamblinghelp.org in Maryland, or 1-800-gambler.net in West Virginia, 1-800-522-4700 in Wyoming. Hope is here. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts, or call 1-877-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York. Alrighty, now we're going to take a look at the Week 14 spreads, money lines, and totals and see where my models show value for this week. But I will say before we start that it's kind of an odd week for me where my models are showing a lot of value in heavy favorites. They want to lay the points in a lot of different spots, and they also do show value in the money lines there. So I do think you could at least consider some spots where you parlay together different money lines. And I always get nervous talking about this because this is something people will do as a bad practice, as a way to extend the odds on and make things longer odds for no reason. They're not confirming that each individual bet is a value. So it can be a bad practice in a lot of ways and not one that I want to recommend. For me personally, these actually are all values based on what my model is showing. And when that's the case, I don't mind parlaying them together to give myself access to all these money lines where I do show value at longer odds. So the ones specifically that I'd be looking to potentially tie together are the Steelers -255 on Thursday night taking on the Patriots. I don't see a big difference between Mitchell Trubisky and Kenny Pickett, honestly. So that's part of why I'd be okay going there. Mentioned with Ryan, I had the Texans as a value of -300 taking on the Jets. Low total in that game. And first game for the Texans with no Tank Dell, and second game with no Larry Tunsil. So downgrade for them there. I do still think they should be able to win that game, though. So do show value in the Texans -300. I've got value in the 49ers at -560 taking on the Seahawks. That game, they're at home. It is a repeat divisional matchup, which we'll talk about here in just 1 second as well. But they're just a very good football team. I've got them like 14-point favorites. So I'm okay with that one. The final one is on Monday night. Dolphins taking on the Titans. That is -900. The implied odds at -900 for the Dolphins are 90%. So we're getting up there quite a bit for sure. It's showing value there for the Dolphins, but my model does show value in each of these spots. So I would be okay pairing those four together. If you do that, the odds at FanDuel Sportsbook are +143. So again, this is not a practice you should do in order to enhance the odds. Like just to, lump together bad bets in order to enhance the odds of them. Do not do that. It is bad practice, and I could never recommend doing something like that. But in this specific instance, where it is 4 spots where my model is showing value on each 4 legs individually, you're kind of just bundling them together to increase the overall expected odds or expected value of each individual bet. So again, those ones were the Steelers minus 255, Texans minus 300, 49ers minus 560, the Dolphins minus 900. I do show value in all those. So if you agree, feel free to do so. But again, I want to recommend and stress again, not a practice I would do unless you show value on all the bets individually, because that can lead you to overconfidence, lead you down bad paths where you are pairing together bets that are not plus EV and just getting an even worse bet as a parlay. So not typically going to go that route, but I do think it is viable for week number 14. Let's take a look at some other spots where I'm showing some value individually on some games. And the first one is one we alluded to earlier on. That is the Bills. Their money line is plus 118 taking on the Chiefs. And I do show value on the Bills in this game. The spread is plus 2.5 at minus 105. So you could go that route as well. But I do like the money line here. The implied odds, the Bills money line are 45.9%. And my model is their win odds at 49.8%. Now, you can hear 49.8% and know that the Bills are on the road and be like, well, that implies that the Bills are the better team in my model. And that is true. And I want to lay out why that's the case, because it surprises me sometimes when I look at it honestly. And I would not be surprised if you were shocked by that as well. But Bills offense does grade out as better than the Chiefs based on numberFire schedule adjusted metrics so far this year. That's the first thing. And offense is good. Second, the Chiefs defense did get a downgrade for me as a result of the injuries they suffered in week number 13. That Packers game, they had guys going down left and right. Now, it's a better setup to have a full week to prepare for those absences versus losing them in game, but it's still not an ideal situation. So those injuries downgrade what has been a very good defense so far this year. I still think the Chiefs defense is better than the Bills because they've been pretty bad, but does downgrade the Chiefs there. Finally, the Bills are coming off a bye, and that does boost them inside my model. So it may feel weird to have this as basically a toss-up, given that it is in Kansas City and the Chiefs have a much better record than the Bills do. But again, better offense, at least based on my numbers for the Bills, defensive injuries for the Chiefs, and a bye week for the Bills all add up to make this effectively a toss-up for me. So at plus 118, good enough value for me to go there. So I will take the Bills plus 118 to win in that big matchup with the Chiefs, which does play into the thoughts around the upside markets for the Bills to make the playoffs and other stuff we discussed with Ryan. Other market where I'm showing value as far as spreads and money lines go is a bit of a tenuous one because we don't really know what the situation is right now. That is for the Browns taking on the Jaguars. And I do show value in the Browns minus 1.5 right now at minus 115. We've seen some movement towards the Browns this morning. They were minus 110 at minus 115 earlier on. They're now minus 115. Their money line has gone to minus 122. Or to minus 126 from minus 122. And obviously the big reason why we've seen movement here is because of the Trevor Lawrence ankle injury that he suffered last night. And the look-ahead line here, the Jags were favored by 2.5, I believe, prior to the Monday Night Football game. So we have seen movement for Lawrence's injury, but I think the market is kind of viewing him as being half in, half out. And he could still play. I don't really know. I've not seen his ankle. I can't diagnose whether or not Lawrence will play. But I think that it's okay to bet the Browns, even taking that risk that Lawrence is okay to go by the time we get to Sunday. And part of it is because Lawrence is not the only injury to the Jags right now. Cam Robinson, their left tackle's on IR. Christian Kirk left last night's game with a groin injury as well. So they've got a couple downgrades in there as well. And they also lost some defensive guys to injury during that game. So that's one thing to think about with the Jags. Other thing is, if I put Lawrence as being in, I don't have this as being a good bet, but it's also not a hideous bet. I would have the Browns favored by 0.3 points in one model and by 2.8 points in a different model. So it's not as if the Browns are some putrid team that would stand no chance if Lawrence were to play. And he probably wouldn't be 100%, even if he is able to go. So that's part of why I feel okay with going with the Browns here. If I were to rule Lawrence out, I'd have the Browns favored by 3.4. So kind of taking the odds that he plays, I think they're probably around like 30% odds that he plays. You blend the 3.4 if he sits with some of the other numbers I laid out before. I think there's a big enough gap here to lay the 1.5 for the Browns. I do not think that Joe Flacco is a great option for the Browns, and I have him as being a pretty poor player in my model as a result of that. And even with Flacco being viewed as pretty skeptically in the model, it does still show this as being a value. So it is risky. I would understand if you didn't want to go here because of the way the Lawrence injury sets up. We have seen some movement towards the Browns even this morning as the news of Lawrence getting a favorable MRI or a favorable X-ray have come out. So I am okay laying the 1.5 with the Browns. I feel fine with that. It is risky, so I understand if you don't want to go here personally, but for me, I am okay with it. So I will bet the Browns -1.5, -115, taking on the Jaguars. First total for the week of me actually also pertains to last night's game between the Bengals and the Browns. On the Bengals side, they are at home taking on the Colts next week, and the total in this game is 42.5, and that's gone up 2 points from what we saw, I believe 2 points from what we saw on Monday night with Jake Browning looking really, really good. I think it's gone a bit too far, and it's not because I'm low on Jake Browning. I get why this number is where it is, because the Colts tend to play in like chaotic games. Their defense is not very good. The Bengals defense is not very good either. So I understand why this total is high, but we got to consider wind speeds. And wind speed projections right now in Cincinnati are 18 miles per hour. That's a really big dent in the scoring environment here. Neither offense is hyper efficient on the ground. So if they're forced to run the ball a bit more, that would accelerate the pace and also, or slow down the pace and also prevent them from getting chunk plays, which I think is a big thing for this market too. If these offenses were a bit more feisty, especially on the ground, I could see the total being 42.5, especially with how good Browning and the Bengals looked on Monday night. But we got two backup quarterbacks starting. Really rough weather here. I think there is good value in the under at 42.5. That's -114 right now at FanDuel Sportsbook. I do think we should go that direction. Again, I know the Colts play in very weird, chaotic, high-scoring games, but to me, with the wind speed where it is right now, I do want to go towards the under for the Colts and the Bengals. Final recommendation for this week is also another total out west. That is for the Seahawks and the 49ers. And this is a repeat of the Thanksgiving matchup between these two teams, the Thursday night games. They did just see each other. In that game, we had the over at 42.5. I believed it finished with 44 total points. So barely got over there. It's 46.5 now. But once again, I am going right back to the over in this one, despite the fact that it is a repeat divisional matchup. The reason why I show value in the over here is in large part because my model, as mentioned, we were talking about the money lines, views the 49ers as heavy favorites. Enough so where there is value in betting them at -10.5. A larger spread corresponds with a higher total. So there is a tie between those two thought processes here as we get to the over of 46.5. We saw the Seahawks offense last week on Thursday against the Cowboys look really, really good. And Geno Smith moved the football very effectively. They got some chunk gains. They played really well. And now they got extra rest coming in. Now, that doesn't impact my view of the spread here because I still think the 49ers are a very, very good team. And that game is accounted for in the model as well. But it does give me more confidence that the Seahawks can uphold their end of the bargain when trying to get some points here. So that's a good thing for this total. You got the 49ers as big favorites, got the Seahawks offense looking a lot better than it was before. And finally, unlike on the East Coast, wind speeds here not that bad. 7 miles per hour right now in Santa Clara, the projection for Sunday. So when you add it all up, I've actually got this total north of 50. So to get it at 46.5, 47 is a pretty key number. I will take the over there at -110 at FanDuel Sportsbook. I do worry a bit about it being a repeat divisional matchup because efficiency does tend to go down in those spots, but I think there's still enough here to take the over at 46.5 at FanDuel Sportsbook. So to recap, you can consider tying those money lines together on the Steelers, Texans, 49ers, and Dolphins if you so choose, but also other spots like this week, Seahawks, Niners, over 46.5, -110. I've got the Bengals and Colts under 42.5, -114. The Browns, -1.5, -115, with the caveat that Lawrence could play in this game. So proceed with caution there. And the Bills money line at +118 as they take on the Chiefs. Before we wrap up for today, do got to go back through recommendations here from this past week on the show and recap how things went for our analysts and myself here on the program. Let's begin things by talking about Dr. Ed Feng. You can find him on Twitter at the Power Rank and check out his work at thepowerrank.com. Ed had a prop for the college football games this past week that was Ollie Gordon under 103.5 rushing yards for their matchup against Texas. And Gordon finished with 34 yards because Texas blasted Oklahoma State. Texas gets their way into the college football playoff. Gordon goes well under. So if you had alternate unders there, kudos to you, but easy win there for Ed. Ed did like Oregon minus 9.5 taking on Washington. Obviously, Washington got the job done, won that game outright. Oregon had chances, just couldn't quite get it done. Kudos to Washington. Big bounce back for them from that lull in the midseason, and a good win for them to catapult themselves to the playoff. Ed had a lean towards Alabama plus 6.5 against Georgia, and obviously they won that game outright. So great call by Ed there and leaning towards Alabama. Now Alabama advances to the playoff as well, where they'll take on Michigan in the semifinals. Other ones from Ed, he had Louisville plus 2.5 taking on Florida State. That was with Tate Rodemaker projected in at that time. And Rodemaker obviously status got worse as the week went along. So did get closing line value here, but not a win as Florida State won that game 16-6. Offense did not do much, but their defense lived up to its reputation. So no win there, but did get movement in his favor with Louisville plus 2.5. For the NFL side of things, Ed had two bets. First one's Eagles plus 2.5 taking on the Niners, and the Niners played really well here. We talked about the Eagles a lot, and it's hard to get a firm grip on them, and that includes in that game. So drop that one there. And then also he had Dak Prescott throw a pick on Thursday night at minus 114, taking on the Seahawks, and Dak was awesome in that game. So was Geno Smith. Really fun game overall. So we'll talk to Ed once again Thursday this week. No college football this week. We'll have him back on Thursday to break down NFL week number 14. We had JJ Zachariason on to talk some player props on Friday. Find JJ on Twitter at Late Round QB. Find his work at lateround.com and the Late Round Fantasy Football Podcast. We went in depth on that Eagles versus Niners game. JJ had two bets there. First one was Brock Purdy over 1.5 passing touchdowns at minus 130, and Purdy went over hit two passing touchdowns pretty quick in that game. So easy win there for JJ. Other one was DeAndre Swift over 17.5 receiving yards at minus 114. Swift got banged up late. He had 2 catches for 7 yards. Probably didn't impact this market. He did get hurt on a target, so maybe could have gotten over there, but couldn't quite get there with 2 catches for 7 yards. On Sunday, JJ had Josh Downs over 48.5 receiving yards at minus 114. Downs, 3 receptions for 14 yards. Alec Pierce popped up in this game for the Colts, which he had not done previously, so I took away from Downs a bit there. JJ had Kyle Pitts over 29.5 receiving yards at minus 114. Pitts had 4 receptions for 51 yards, so I win there for JJ with Pitts. He had Kenny Pickett to throw 2+ passing touchdowns. That was plus 162, and Pickett got hurt in this game, obviously pretty early, so couldn't get the job done there, but that's kind of how things go when you're betting overs. Injury risk is always there. I thought it was a good bet from JJ, but the injury risk is always there and something we have to deal with when betting overs. Finally, JJ had Antonio Gibson plus 430 for an anytime touchdown for the Commanders, and Gibson was involved even before Brian Robinson got banged up. 10 carries and 5 targets, but no touchdowns here for Gibson, so couldn't quite get that one at plus 430. Would have been a fun one. Could he have gotten that one? But we'll get JJ back on the show. Actually, not this week. He's off this week, but then back with us the following week on Friday. Talked about this already, but Ryan Williams had a fantastic night last night with his recommendations. He had the Bengals plus 9.5, and obviously they won that game outright. He had under 39.5, which was a loss there. And then the other loss was Calvin Ridley over 56.5 receiving yards at minus 112. Ridley, I think, had 26 because he had a loss late in that game. So 2 losses there, but everything else was a winner for Ryan. Evan Ingram, plus 270, anytime touchdown, first touchdown this year for Ingram. That hit. He had Travis Etienne over 15.5 receiving yards at minus 113. Etienne, I think, was around 34, somewhere in there. He had Jamar Chase for anytime touchdown at plus 210. Chase had a big one, as he always does, so good hit by Ryan there. He had Chase over 5.5 receptions at minus 106. He had 11. We talked about the alt market there, so hopefully you had some exposure to the alt market too to get some plus money on that one. He had Tyler Boyd over 30.5 receiving yards. Boyd had 37. And finally, he had the Bengals over 6.5 first half points at minus 130. Another win there. So 7-2 overall for Ryan. He had wins of plus 270 and plus 210. So good calls by Ryan across the board. Excited to get him back on the show once again next week on Monday. Good week for me as well. I went 3-1 for the week overall. The one loss was the Buccaneers -5.5, -108. This one moved badly against me. It was Bucks -3 by Sunday, and that's where it finished. Was the Bucks winning by 3. So they got the win, not the cover though. Mark moved against me, so bad read by me. I likely undervalued the returning defensive players for the Panthers in that game. I think that's probably why I whiffed on that one. So bad call there on my behalf. Other ones, I had the Packers +6.5 against the Chiefs at -104. They won that game outright, so hopefully I had some on the money line as well. I had the Jags Bengals last night over 38.5. Talked about that on Tuesday at -110. And that was a winner. And of course, on Monday, we talked about the Bengals money or the Jags Bengals money line at +370. Didn't have that one on the Tuesday show because it wasn't a value at that time for me. It had to lengthen throughout the week. Eventually did get there. +370, I had a 24% to win, and the implied odds around 21%. So got that one as well. So good week overall. Good Monday specifically with the Bengals money line and the total, and then all of Ryan's stuff as well. So hopefully a winning week for you in your bets. That is all that we have here for today on Covering the Spread. Want to give a big thank you once again to Ryan Williams. Check him out on Twitter at RyanAlexander_W. You can find me on Twitter at Jim Saunas. You can find me on Threads at Jim.Saunas. You can find FanDuel Research on Twitter at FanDuel Research. Want to thank you all for tuning in forward today. Good luck to you with your bets across Tuesday. We'll talk to you once again Wednesday. Talk some NBA and NHL with Tom Vecchio. This has been Covering the Spread right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network.